If you just use Slate right off the shelf, it won't give you anything. Or what happens if you toggle bold at the edge of the link and start typing. There's so many different scenarios.
I've already built an example of portable text editor with gherkins UI components, and you're still writing the same portable text, but you're in complete control of the editor.
So you put your Gherkin in a race car, and
these sentences are making less sense as you're speaking them, not more sense.
Yeah, we should have started with that.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Code and Content, the podcast for conversations at the intersection of code and content. Have you ever tried to implement a rich text editor before? I have. I've been making websites for long enough where I remember implementing Tiny MCE or CK editor, these sorts of things, and they're relatively easy. It's just like a JavaScript tag you had to put inline in the page, but it only ever saved content as a string. So usually it was HTML or Markdown or textile, if you might remember formats like those. And those formats work in a limited scenario, but they're not very fun to work with. Certainly trying to convince people to format text with textile and text pattern. I'm showing my age there if you ever use those CMSs. That was never fun, and it was really brittle. It's easy to break Markdown syntax and even HTML. If you used a WordPress editor before, the classic editor, of course, you can switch over to code view, and you can very easily break the syntax if you want to do that. It also makes it very difficult to query or serialize, to change the rendering of any of that content if you want to do something really magical with it. And I know WordPress is stuck with that with Gutenberg or the block editor, where I think you've got JSON comments inside of HTML now as well. And it's very convoluted for what is essentially saved as a string. And you might have worked with some more modern block editing libraries before, like TipTap and these. But I know in my personal experience, I've found them quite tricky to work with. And I've never really loved the experience of trying to implement block editor libraries into my apps. And that's why I was so excited to use the portable text editor, which was released recently. And call me biased if you like, but it really is the simplest library for setting up a block editor that I've ever used. And of course, I'm quite familiar with the portable text editor because it lived inside of Sanity Studio for the longest time, but now has been extracted to its own component where you can drop the portable text block editor into an application of your own. I've made a video about this showing how to make it have rich text comments in a Next.js blog and send those comments into a Sanity Studio. But really, the purpose of extracting the portable text editor out of the studio was so that you could put it in any app. You don't need to use Sanity for any of this. You get an editor now, which is very simple to set up, very React-like API. The behavior API is excellent. Everything is declarative, just like you want. So if you want to use the portable text editor and to combine it with a library like Frame Motion, you're very much able to do that now. And it's really great. You're in control of every part of the rendering. So I've made some demo apps recently, one where it's using the Tailwind headless UI library to make all of the buttons that, make things bold and insert blocks and that sort of thing. I've done another demo recently too that uses the Shadcn UI library. And once again, in full control of how the rich text editor renders. And that's excellent because, as the title of the episode suggests, setting up a block editor is like the final boss of front end. It's so fiddly and so tricky, but this portable text editor really is the one that has clicked the most with me. So it's what I would love to put into more applications if I was building them. But the portable text editor wasn't always a nice standalone little library that you could put into your own apps. It was this highly customized component that was written on top of Slate.js. And that's why I've brought on Christian today, who's I'm interviewing for today's episode of the podcast, because he has done the legwork of pulling out this very much buried component inside of the huge Sanity Studio code base and making this now that's something that available for everyone. And it's really an excellent piece of work. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I learned an awful lot about the amount of work and care and test suites and all of this was put into getting the portable text editor into a state where you and I can put it into our own apps, which is really cool. There's probably some things we should have covered over. There's probably some built-in logic that I might not have covered in fine detail about the portable text editor if you've never known it before. There's a lot of terminology around block editors and rich text editors that I'd never heard of before. Of course, you probably know what a caret is, so where your cursor is inside of a text area. But things like collapsed selections, annotations, schema types, all of that. There's a few things you need to learn about the language of how to work with block editors if you're going to get involved. once you figure those out, it's pretty straightforward and you're on your way. But this interview with Christian and this conversation was really fun to have, and I'm so much of an admirer of the work that he has done and how it has made the portable text editor better, not only inside of Sanity Studio, but now made it something globally available for everybody to use. And it really is now a launch pad for not only the editor itself, but the portable text specification, the standard of portable text. That is a way to define content as data so that it can be very easily serialized and very easily queried if you're using something like Grok as well. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you're not subscribed, make sure you already do subscribe to this. Make sure that you like this as well. I can't believe I'm saying those words. I think everybody who says them for the first time has this same moment that I'm having right now. Please like and subscribe. So let's jump in and have a listen to this interview. Christian, thank you for joining me today on Code and Content. I'd love to talk to you because you've been the driving force behind the portable text editor, which is a React-based rich text and block content editor, which has been my favorite to work with of any I've ever tried to integrate into a React application. So give me a quick rundown on what the portable text editor is and how you ended up being the force behind it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the portable text editor is a block editor. So it can read and produce the portable text format. And how I ended up working on it. Yeah, so I have a bit of a background in like text editing, building tools around text editing, but also specifically working on editors and specifically working on block editors. So, and which is like something that has become like hugely popular during the last years. Now every editor out there is pretty much a block editor where you expect that you can move these blocks up and down basically.
Yeah, it's a distinction I only came to pretty recently, is that there's a difference between like a rich text editor, which is maybe what we were used to if you're a dinosaur like myself, when it was just all sort of WYSIWYG, bold italics, this sort of thing, where a block editor is rich blocks of content, right? And that's what portable text is really great for. Do you want to explain portable text as well as a standard?
Yes, it's an open standard for representing structured content. It's very unopinionated, as you can do pretty much anything in it. You can and it's the format that also drives Sanity. Structured content.
And it's an alternative to storing it as storing content as a Markdown or HTML or many other serializable formats. So portable text is a format that we created here at Sanity because there wasn't really anything quite like it, not a standardized library anyway.
Yeah, and should mention that it's JSON based. Format.
So all of the content that you're working with in that block editor is serializable to JSON, and it's devoid of presentation, right? So when we style things or we save content in HTML or Markdown, you are writing the formatting into the content, and those two are related, where portable text allows us to separate those, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the portable text editor is based on Slate?
Yes.
So why did we build portable text editor then if Slate already exists?
So that's a good question. Slate is under the hood of portable text editor at the very bottom layer of it. And Slate is similarly as portable text is very unopinionated. Slate is also very unopinionated. It's basically a framework for building your own rich text editor.
Okay, so it's not necessarily designed to be interacted with directly.
No, it is not. Like if you go to the Slate website and you look at the examples that are there, they're very basic. I don't think any of them even have a way to create a link. So if you want to be able to create a link in your text editor, you have to do that yourself, and you have to implement all the rules on top of that. Like how does a link actually behave? You have to build that on top of Slate. So it is very unopinionated, which is great for us because we can do pretty much whatever we want on top of Slate. And and then the only thing we don't have to worry about is all these very low level things like actually taking care of inserting text when some composition events happen or insert text events happen.
Right. Okay. So it's doing all of the grunt work under the scenes, but we can just build a nicer API.
Yeah.
Building apps on top of Slate.
Yeah, I think you could say that. Yeah.
And using the portable text format. And so we've got this declarative API then with the portable text editor to handle events. Do you want to go through some of those APIs that you've built? Because that configuration layer, I think, is some of the most fun I've had working with portable text editor.
Yeah. So, this is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So we started talking internally at Sanity about that we need a better way to extend the portable text editor.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit too much of a black box. So if you wanted to insert a block, you had to kind of like call a method on it. And if you found yourself in a situation where you wanted to do something different, you couldn't really, or it was kind of hard. So we needed like a more like generic and configurable way to extend the editor behaviors, basically.
And at that time, the portable text editor was a very complicated component buried deep within the studio code as well, wasn't it? So you had to get right down into it to make any configuration.
Yes, that's true as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, if we go even further back in time, one of the first things we did when we knew we wanted to do more with the portable text editor, we knew we wanted to like bring it more out in the open and do more with it. Like we basically pulled it out of the Sanity Studio.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's a standalone editor in its own repository.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to work. And now we started to like think about, okay, how can we actually make this into a really nice text editor that you can extend in pretty much any way you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this means extensions that someone builds for the studio, for the portable text editor outside of the studio, we could very easily add that into the studio's version of the portable text editor and vice versa as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And so the behavior API is one of these?
Yes, it's called the behavior API. Mm-hmm. That's at least like, I guess the first ingredient towards this place where I think we'll eventually have like a really nice plugin system.
Mm-hmm.
So right now the plugin system is the behavior API, which is I think is a really nice start. So it is what it is what it says. It's like an API to configure the behavior of the editor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
what's an example of a behavior?
A behavior is like when I insert the character A.
Yep.
Do I just want the character A to be inserted, or do I want to do something different? So you could hook into that and do your own behavior. Like maybe you want to disallow lowercase a for some reason, and you could hook into the insert text event.
Mm-hmm.
You can check if a lowercase a was inserted, and you can insert an uppercase a instead. Like that would not be very useful, but
it's possible. That's nice. But this is how you get events like slash commands, right? So if I press the slash key and it's the start of a line, then I could open a React component, for example. Like that's how we get that sort of
exactly. So it's very like it's very like I think it's very fun to work with. It feels very intuitive. So we have different concepts that we can get into, but something like a slash command,
mm-hmm.
it's like when you start to learn this API, it feels very intuitive. Okay, you need to listen for the insert text event.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I check if the text is a slash. Okay, I check if I'm at the beginning of a block, maybe. Yeah, and I check if maybe my selection is collapsed, just to be sure. And then
a collapse selection that's where there is a selection or isn't a selection.
A collapse selection is a selection without like a range, or it's just the caret.
Okay,
right.
All the terminology it's fascinating as someone coming from the outside. Like a collapsed selection are things that I've had to get my head around. Sorry, but continue.
No, but this is also one of the things that are a little bit challenging. Like there's so many terms, and how do you make them easily understandable?
Yeah.
So there's portable text terms.
Yeah.
There's rich text editing terms,
mm-hmm.
and
Slate probably has some of its own
and
terms.
We have our own terms on top, like behavior API terms, which is like also influenced by state machines.
Okay.
So we can talk.
So there's a lot to hold in your head at once when you're building this sort of thing. So because the portable text editor can do so many different things, and I suppose, like we said, there's so many fine-grained behaviors, like what should happen if my caret is at the end of an inline object or at the end of an annotation like a link. what should happen next? If I start typing, should that text be inside the link or should it go outside the link? All of those micro behaviors, that's, I think, is fascinating when I've been using Portable Text Editor is I've never thought about that, like not even once. But then as soon as you start configuring the rich text editor, you're like, oh, wait a minute, like someone has to think about the behavior here. So how do you maintain that consistency? And I guess how much time have you spent in other block and rich text editors to sort of see how they're handling that behavior?
Yeah. That's a good question, because as I said before, like if you just use Slate right off the shelf, it won't give you anything. Like it
doesn't have opinions on those.
It doesn't have opinions on those things. So you have to you have to implement that yourself. All of these rules. So if we take an easy example, like if you have a piece of text and it's bold, and you put your caret at the end of or in the middle of that bold text and you start writing, then of course the new text is also bold.
Yep.
And then it's also very common in text editors that if you put your caret or your cursor at the end of that text and you start writing, it continues to be bold. It's a little bit different for links. It's quite common that you see that links are more treated as a boundary.
Right.
So you can write inside of a link and it will still be a link. But if you put your caret right at the edge of the link and start typing, then you actually type outside of the link.
Right.
Most text editors agree on this. I've tested a lot of them. It feels like a very this feels like a common rule, like a standard behavior. This is how they behave. Most of them behave that way.
Yeah. It's funny because it's just become part of my behavior. I'll move the caret one letter over, type the word I want, and then have to delete that character off the end because I want to extend the text in the link, and that's what you end up having to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we can do some things there.
But it is interesting to have to standardize all those behaviors. So I imagine you've had to start writing some tests then to make sure that like all of those little things always work the same way every time we ship an iteration of Portable Text Editor?
Yeah, that's the only way to keep that stuff in check. It's basically to have automated tests. There are so many different scenarios that you have to consider. And now I talked about inserting text at the edge of a link. But what if the link is also bold? What happens then? Or what happens if you toggle bold at the edge of the link and start typing? There's so many different scenarios.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you want to keep all these in check, you want to write a lot of automated tests.
Yeah.
So that's what I started out doing. Like I started to write automated tests. And eventually I started just generating automated tests. Because there were so many tests to write.
Yeah.
And now they're just generated.
Do you have a count on that at the moment? Like how many tests are we up to with the...
More than 200.
Okay.
Or for like the standard text editing behavior.
Yeah.
We have different unit tests as well. But just for like tests that test what should happen when you put your caret in a certain position and write, about 200 of those.
Yeah, right.
That are generated.
It's amazing. And all that behavior you just take for granted open up Notion, you open up Google Docs, and you just expect those things to happen. But someone had to think about the behavior of what should happen. So having played with Portable Text Editor a bit as well, it might look like a lot of hard work initially because even though Slate is unopinionated, I guess a Portable Text Editor, like if you install it with the defaults, comes with probably far fewer of the behaviors than someone might expect. So, but because now it's all code, it's open source and everything, we'd be able to ship a starter kit with a lot of the expected defaults, like expected behaviors, wouldn't we?
Right. Yeah.
So things like those markdown shortcuts that we shipped recently, like that's now a package in the code that you could just quickly import. Are those behaviors as well, or are they something else? The markdown shortcut?
Oh, that's behaviors. So markdown behaviors is like when you dash space at the beginning of a line, it turns into an unordered list.
Yeah,
basically that would be an example of a markdown behavior.
Yeah,
that sort of logic is implemented using the behavior API, and you can then you can just import these behaviors. We're basically shipping this bundle of markdown behaviors that you can then extend your own editor with. Not everybody would want these, so we're not going to put these in core.
Yeah,
this is not a core behavior. We have core behaviors, and you can, by the way, also like rip out those if you want.
If you actually wanted even fewer opinions from the start.
Yeah, and that's also like a continuous the continuous thing I'm working on is taking more and more of our I don't know, maybe I can say hard-coded logic, turning it into core behaviors, because the more we do that, the more you can extend and configure.
To be easier to override those behaviors if you disagree with the core behavior.
Yeah, I think it's good to have some sensible defaults in place, but if you want to override it, then you should be able to. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So back to the Markdown behaviors, it's like a bundle of behaviors that you can import, and it's shipped as it's even shipped as a plugin, so just a React component that just sets them up. So you just import a Markdown plugin, put it in the editor, and they're there.
Yeah.
And if you unmount that component, they're gone again. Yeah. So I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's what's really cool about playing with this is that you could just spread in behaviors or spread in components and and leaves everything very low level. So like I've already built an example of portable text editor with Tailwind's headless components and another one with like Shadcn UI components, and you're still writing the same portable text, but you're in complete control of the editor. Yeah, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Actually, back on tests, I believe have you built like some sort of test suite generator? What's that extra package that you released? Because it uses Gherkin tests. Is that right? That's not an expression I'm familiar with. Do you want to explain what a Gherkin test is and what you actually built then on top of that?
Yes. So Gherkin is a human readable language for behavior-driven development. Principles behind Gherkin is you basically define your test using this human readable language. So given a condition, when this happens, then I expect this.
Yeah.
All right. So given A is inserted, when the no A behavior is in place, then an uppercase A is inserted. Yeah. So something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So given when then
in our scenario where we don't want the lowercase a anywhere in our text.
So it's all around this given when then.
What was the testing library you released? Is that am I misremembering that something exists?
Yeah. So working with Gherkin, Gherkin is created by Cucumber. Cucumber has libraries for turning Gherkin into or compiling Gherkin tests or Gherkin scenarios into different languages. So there's a package for JavaScript.
Okay.
So we use that package, and then we created a tool on top of that is called RaceJar.
Okay.
So it's a tool that allows you to go very fast,
right,
with your Gherkin.
Okay.
So you put your Gherkin in a race car, and
these sentences are making less sense as you're speaking to them, not more sense.
But it's essentially just a really nice library for working with Gherkin tests.
Okay.
So it's a library that helps you. You just put in the tests, the Gherkin text, for your test. And then all of these lines, like given, when, then, they need to have some sort of definition in code,
right?
So they can run some test code. So you also you need to define these step definitions as we call them.
Yeah. And
RaceJar helps you do that.
Okay.
And if you want to get really complicated, then there's something called parameters where you can if you want to input a more complex data into a Gherkin step. It will know what a string is and it will know what a number is. But if you want to put maybe some special, an array of things, I would get a little bit complicated. But parameters are a way to kind of completely tailor your own sort of parameters to put into a test.
Okay.
So I actually use that as well.
Yeah.
Because I created, we have portable text, which is the JSON. This is the JSON format.
Yep.
But for a lot of the tests, I want to test that. The text is in a special or is in a specific state, and I could assert that by taking JSON and comparing JSON, but that becomes a little bit verbose in the test suite.
Yeah.
So I basically created a parameter type to encapsulate the state of portable text in just one string.
Yeah, right.
So, for example, if you have full bar bass as a text, you make bar bold, then your text is split up into 3 pieces.
Yes.
So in my terse PT format, as I call it, then that would be foo, comma bar, comma bass, basically. So that's how it looks in the test, and I can kind of, I can basically transform portable text into my terse PT, and compare that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense.
I think it is. So yeah, because this test suite has to test not only is the behavior in the portable text editor correct, but is the resulted portable text serializable JSON, is that correct also?
Yeah.
So you're actually testing the output value as well as did the editor do the correct thing?
Yeah. It's split up into all the right ways, and do all the different pieces have the right sort of marks on them?
Yep. Do you want to talk about state machines as well? Because I know there's a lot of state machine logic behind the scenes here, like for how it works. So how does that impact? That's probably going back to the behavior API or things like, should the editor be selected? There's events where, it might make sense seemingly to just say, well, the editor should be selected. So the default behavior should be by default select the editor. But it's actually more of a state machine logic and you're in control of that. Do you want to speak about that as well?
Yes. So state machines are everywhere, whether you like it or not. The question is just, are they explicit or not?
Yep.
And then there's this thing, this concept on top of state machines, which is probably what you find in even more places. It's like state charts.
State charts?
Yeah. So a state chart is also a state machine, but technically we are using state charts because they actually make state machines usable for most things.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's just call it state machines. Yeah. So state machines,
and people shouldn't be scared off, right? Like the state machine shouldn't scare anybody away. It's something we have to deal with.
Yeah. But the state machines are just a really nice way to describe like the finite states that your program can be in, or your application can be in.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you can differentiate between these finite states and then the infinite states, basically. So if you take an editor like portable text, then whether or not the editor is in read-only mode or in editable mode, that would be two finite states, and it can never be in both at once. Will be in one or the other. And then there's the more infinite state that you cannot really like count, and that would be probably the portable text value itself. That is in that sort of space. Yeah. So a lot of the internal logic of PTE is encapsulated in state machines. So whether or not it's setting up, it's syncing a value, or it's in read-only, and it's
and this must make working with portable text editor then much more reliable, or like you can anticipate what the next event is, or at least declare what the next event should be.
Yeah, I hope it feels more robust because of this.
Yeah.
And then as you pointed out, like that state machines is also like, or has been a huge influence in the behavior API.
Yeah.
The idea or it is technically state charts. The idea that you listen for events and you have a guard to determine if this event should be considered or not given the current state.
Yeah.
And then you want to if this guard is like returns the truthly value, you want to like then do something.
Yeah.
Because of this event.
Yeah.
You want to maybe produce a side effect.
Yeah.
Like you want to lock something to the console, or you want to open a / command pop over menu. Or maybe you don't want to produce a side effect. Maybe you just want to insert text or insert an image.
Yeah.
That would be an action on the editor itself. So it's a very like powerful language for describing behavior in an application.
Yeah.
And we're basically taking these concepts. So I think that's another neat thing. Like, we're not inventing new concepts here. You can read about state charts concepts and apply them to the behavior API.
Yeah.
So the idea that you listen for events, it's called events.
Yeah.
You have a guard to determine things, and you send actions into the state machine.
Yeah.
Those are not terms that we made up. And then there's also another very powerful thing, which is like in a behavior, you can also raise events again, which is also a state machine concept.
Yeah.
So you can basically, given this event, I want to send a completely different event into the editor. So you raise that event.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
No, it is cool to be able to like get in the middle of those events in the editor so that you can do whatever crazy thing that you want, because it's not the whole idea of working with the block editor is to have it be highly interactive so that, if you do want to send some, like you say, logging an event because a keystroke of a particular type happened, or to be able to get in the middle. I know one example I brought to you when I was first working with it was, if I pressed the spacebar to toggle bold on and off, then, if I've got text selected and I press bold with the spacebar, I don't want to unselect that text, or I don't want to reselect that text because pressing space again would clear that text. And there's just behaviors like that I would never have, again, had to think about. But because I can get in between what happens next when this action happens, that's been very cool to be able to play with. So you can get right down to fine-grained changes when you want to make the editor do whatever you want, whether that's just inserting and formatting text or inserting entire blocks and customizing all of that. So that's been really fun. What's next for the portable text editor? Because you've done so much work on it already, but I imagine there's probably all sorts of ideas you've had but not had the time or resources to get to. Are there like grand ambitions and ideas for what's next in the portable text editor?
Yeah, there's so much we want to do. There is. It's really nice to have like the foundation in place. It's really nice to have that standard behavior test suite in place. I cannot count how many times that have saved me.
Yeah.
So now we have that in place. We have a very nice API for encapsulating behaviors. And we're going to keep extending that. And the last thing I did was making it possible to better hook into copy and paste events.
Okay.
So what do you want to happen when HTML is pasted?
Yep.
For example.
Actually, we didn't even get into that, did we? Like when you've got something in the clipboard, you can actually analyze the contents of the clipboard and because you want to handle pasting Markdown differently to pasting HTML, I'm guessing. So like there might be a whole other world of what to do just with the clipboard, right?
Yeah. So we have so I work with the copy and paste, and you can hook into that and do whatever you want based on like what type of data is pasted, and you can same way you can hook into the copy events and decide if you want to like serialize it in a special way on the clipboard. If you want to like copy it to some other place and you want to, for some reason, serialized into something completely different.
Well, I mean, one example might be, I could imagine a future, or tell me where this isn't possible, but imagine where I've copy and pasted Markdown. If you could can you intercept paste events? So I could intercept a paste event, and if there's a URL there, I could say, actually swap that URL for an internal reference.
Yes.
And do those sorts of things. So you could actually automate those sorts of processes to turn Markdown, which is just a string, into structured content on paste.
Yeah, exactly. So what is next? I can't really, like it's impossible for me to think about copy paste without thinking about drag and drop.
Okay,
it's so similar.
Yeah,
to me it's so similar.
Yeah.
So drag and drop is a natural next step.
Yeah,
we're gonna also need that at Sanity.
Yeah,
way better copy drag and drop affordances.
Yeah, because we can drag and drop blocks at the moment. Not any, like I can't drag and drop a paragraph.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. Exactly.
Okay.
So we're gonna make that much better.
Okay.
It's a very natural thing to do.
You don't have to commit to too much
if you don't want to. But and then there's another thing I'm thinking about is that I want to take the plugin idea even further. Because right now, a plugin is first of all, a plugin is unopinionated. You don't have to use a plugin. Don't have to create a plugin. But the idea is that right now a plugin is a reg component that sets up behaviors and tears them down again when it's unmounted. But I want a plugin to be able to do more. I wish it could do more.
Yeah.
I wish a plugin could encapsulate everything related to a single entity or piece of logic.
Yeah, right.
So something like a link, for example. Again, we're going back to links, but a link, you have some behaviors around links that you probably want in place. You want to be able to, when a link is pasted, it's turned into a link.
Yeah,
stuff like that. So that's a behavior, right? But then there is also the question of what is a link.
Yeah.
Because a portable text doesn't have any opinions on what a link is. So you need to define what a link is in your schema.
Yeah.
but the schema is defined in a different place than the behavior.
Yeah.
So it would be kind of cool if a plugin could also take care of that.
Could be aware of the schema, of the behavior, of everything.
Right, and then also the rendering. Like how does the link look?
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We probably should have covered that at the top, but those are the distinct parts of the portable text editor, aren't they? It's like the schema, which is like the structure of the document that's available.
Yeah.
The rendering, which is like what will that piece of schema look like when it's rendered into the editor?
Yeah.
And the behaviors that are around it. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have started with that.
We should have started with that. I'll edit it so that comes at the start, and then we'll go back to the end. No, that's cool. Okay, so yeah, plugins that could reach every part of the configuration. That sounds neat.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I think, is there anything else we've left out, do you think? I mean, there's been so much hard work go into this, and I've only scratched the surface, I'm sure. I've been able to benefit from the outputs of it, but is there anything more behind the scenes that you feel like we've left out?
I think it's I feel pretty good about what we covered. There's one thing I just want to highlight how great the behavior API is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because for me, it has really like made it possible to turn, like, basically open up the editor.
Yeah.
Like this. And I can feel that myself when I work in it. I only implement internal logic now using behavior API. I don't hard code internal logic anymore. And it's not only easier to do, it's easier to read. It has fewer bugs. Like, I basically rewrote our logic into behaviors. And I found bugs along the way that were hard to spot before because they were they were basically implementing it in Slate APIs, but now we just use our own API. It's really nice.
That is very cool. So any user of the portable text editor would use the same API that you would as the creator of the portable text API.
I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I think the test suite that we have, the Gherkin scenarios or the Gherkin features, what happens when you have overlapping bold and italic and overlapping links, all of that stuff. I think that whole spec is very unique and something we can be proud of.
Yeah.
I don't think any other text editor has encapsulated these rules like we did.
Yeah.
And you can read them in a human readable language.
Yeah.
You can just read what happens.
And the idea of all of this being open source, because that whole test suite, the editor and the portable text standard, like, that's all open source. We actually want other people to use this, don't we? Like, that's sort of the key of all of this, is that because now you can put the editor in your apps. The standard has been open since it was initiated, but that's the dream, isn't it? Is that for this to get wide adoption, we talked a lot about sanity today, but if this was to get wide adoption that we like, we'd see the growth of this editor, explode. Ideally, that would be like, we don't want you to have to be the sole maintainer of the editor forever, right? As much as you're enjoying working on it, it would be cool to see wider adoption, and I imagine how much faster the pace of development would grow.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Christian, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome.